Hi guys, I'm Seth with Hornady Manufacturing. Today, we're going to talk about the Hornady Ballistic App. Now this app is available to you for Android and iPhone users free of charge in the App Store. And what it does is it allows you to get the absolute most accurate trajectory solutions available today. It does that by using drag coefficient instead of ballistic coefficient. It uses the CD versus Mach and the aerodynamic moments and coefficients to get the most accurate trajectory solutions available. To get started using it, download it from the App Store. And when you open it up, you'll be prompted to continue as a guest or create a login profile. And I would suggest you create a login profile, and that's going to do a couple things for you. First, it's going to allow you to store your favorite profiles. You can build a profile for each of your rifles, and they will be saved. Next, if you happen to break your cell phone or get a new phone or you want to log in on multiple devices, by saving your profile, you can log in and gain access to those profiles. So download the app and let's get started. All right, now that you've downloaded the app and you've logged in, you'll be greeted by a home screen, and there are a few tiles on that screen. The first tile is the Hornady Calculator, and that's the feature we're going to be working with today. The next tile is the BC calculator. It's a pretty standard calculator that uses BC to get a trajectory. The next tile is our ammo library, and that's got some pre-populated fields that we've put in for velocity and BC based off our existing ammunition SKUs. Those two specific features will be addressed in a separate video. Next, you've got a help and support tile, which will have some definitions of some of the items that we're going through. And lastly, you've got Hornady on the web, and that tile will take you to our website. To get started, simply click the Hornady tile. So you'll be greeted by two options, favorites and general calculator. Now the general calculator can be used to use the Hornady engine to make a solution. However, you cannot save the profile. So to create a profile for your specific rifle, select the favorites tab. If you don't have any selected, you'll simply press the plus sign icon in the center of the screen. And again, you can select between BC calculator and Hornady. And in this case, we're using Hornady. Now here is your add favorites screen. At the very top, you have a picture, and you can either take a new photo, you can select a photo from your existing library, or you don't have to have a photo at all. Next is the title. Now of all these fields, the title is the one that has to be filled out in order for you to save. So we'll select the title, and this can be the name of the rifle if you've got a funny name for it, or it could be the name of the cartridge, what have you. It just has to have a title. We'll name this one Jenny. Next is the rifle. And again, this can be the same as the title. It doesn't have to be anything at all, but I like to put the cartridge that I'm shooting. In this case, it's a 6 Creedmoor. Like the others, the optics does not have to be filled out, but we'll put it in anyways, just so we're clear. And the most important one next is the bullet. Now, we have bullets from Hornady and Berger and Sierra and a few other manufacturers with their popular long-range bullets. And what you're doing when you select a bullet out of the Hornady library is you are pulling in 437 different points unique to that individual bullet. That includes mass distribution properties, some inertia. It pulls in the radar-derived CD versus Mach curve, which is the most accurate representation of how a bullet flies through the air. It also pulls in the aerodynamic moment and coefficient table as well. So that's what really separates it from using ballistic coefficient. This has two different tables and 437 unique points to that bullet, where BC uses, in a lot of cases, one individual number to represent how that bullet flies. So simply select that tab and it will bring up our full library. Now today we're using 108 grain ELD match factory ammo, so we'll select the 108 ELD match. The next tab down is set load info. Now in this tab, if you were hand loading, you have the option to put your specific load recipe in there, up there at the top. To access that, simply toggle it on and off with the toggle in the right hand side of the screen. Below that, you have the ammunition temperature sensitivity. Now, propellant used in rifle cartridges reacts slightly differently depending on the ambient temperature. Some are worse than others. So what you can do to turn this on is select the toggle. and then you will select what propellant you are using, and we've pre-populated a pretty good table where we have tested those propellants and we've given it a specific value. If you'd like, you can also do some testing at home to enter a unique value if you'd like, but simply press the powders table and go through and select the popular powders and pick which one you're using. We'll back out of that screen with the back arrow, and we'll go to the next tab, which is the rifle info. Now, this is a lot of important information here, and some of which we'll go through and we'll change down the road, but we'll get more into that as we zero the rifle. For now, we'll go with some given information that we know. The first is muzzle velocity. Now, we're going to use this lab radar to receive our muzzle velocity when we shoot this at the range, but for now, we know it's going to be in the ballpark of about 2950 feet per second. Next is the zero range and zero angle. And this is one of the hallmarks of using the FORDOF app, is that we use something known as zero angle, and it is different than zero range. It's going to increase the accuracy of the calculations throughout a wide variety of elevations and temperatures, and no matter where you go in the world, your solutions will be accurate because you're using zero angle. Not true if you use simple zero range. So we're going to leave the zero range at 100 yards right now, and we're going to move on to the next step, which is the sight height. Now, the sight height is the center of the bore axis to the center of the scope axis. And we want to be accurate with this to about 1/10 of an inch. So it's not imperative that you use a set of calipers, but we do want to be as accurate as we can. Kind of an easy way to do it is where your top of your stock meets the center of your scope ring. So we'll measure that here. We come out to 2.080. So we'll go ahead and put that in. You can either use the slide rule to slide this back and forth, the plus sign, or you can simply select the numbers and type in exactly what you measured. Next is the barrel twist. This one is equipped with a 7.5-inch twist. So we'll type in 7.5. The final tab is impact windage. Now, when you zero your rifle, you can adjust the windage turret so that you are hitting dead center windage-wise when you zero the rifle. Another option is to use the impact windage. What you can do is, if your group is to the left or to the right of where you're aiming, because of the wind, you can not slip your turrets on your scope, not dial anything, but correct for it here, and that will make sure that FORDOF accounts for it and gives you an accurate shooting solution. The bore diameter will pre-populate based on what bullet you selected from the library. However, if your specific barrel has a different than standard bore dimension, you can input that here. And lastly is the axial form factor. Now, the axial form factor will be adjusted later on in this video when we shoot it at range. What this allows you to do is take into account the different variables like propellant, muzzle device, bore quality, twist rate, land and groove configurations, etc. All of those things have a very slight effect on the drag of the projectile. So you need to account for it if you want the most accurate extended range solutions. So we'll dive into that a little bit later. At this point, the set rifle info is good to go, and we can move on to the next step. So wrapping up the add favorite profile here, you have the input-output options. Now, the standard default input-output is the US standard. You can also select it and select the metric option. The units standard default is MOA, and that's true minute of angle. And you can select between that, MRAD, and inches or centimeters. And in this case, this is a milliradian scope. Important to note is that these are now the universal favorite for this profile. And then if you save this profile and go out and come back in, it will always reflect what you select here. Now, as we get into using the actual calculator, there are some options in the HUD that will allow you to quickly select or move between MOA, mils, inches, etc. However, that does not change this profile. When you back out of it and you close the HUD and you come back in, it will always come back to this setting. So this is the permanent favorite setting. So to save your profile, simply select the Save button in the upper right-hand corner. So now to zero the rifle, you're going to open up your newly created favorites profile and select the ellipsis on the right-hand side, and that'll bring up some options to select the profile, to edit it, to clone it, or delete it. So we'll go ahead and edit that. And you're going to go back into the Set Rifle Info area. Now, the second tab down is zero range, which we left at a 100 yards, and zero angle. Now, the difference here is the zero range is the traditional range that you've zeroed your rifle that you're very familiar with. What zero angle will allow you to do is zero your rifle one time, and unless you change ammo or bullet or something like that, or get a new scope, you don't have to zero your rifle again. With the zero range, what you do is create an instance where the trajectory is only going to be as precisely accurate as possible for those exact shooting conditions. So as conditions change and elevation changes, that zero shifts around a little bit. And that's why you see people before every match, re-zeroing their rifles. If you use zero angle, you no longer have to do that when you get to a match or you get to a hunting location. You do it once, you do it properly, and it's done for the remainder of that rifle's life unless you change ammo, change bullet, or get a new scope. So to take advantage of that feature, select the toggle, and you'll see it illuminated the Find Zero Angle. So go ahead and select that. What that's going to do is bring up a bunch of fields for you that you have to fill in to the best of your ability to get the most accurate solution. Now, we shot ours this morning for the purpose of this video, and we used the lab radar to get our muzzle velocity, which in our case was 2968 feet per second. Now, the zero target distance, for us, that was 101 yard. It pre-populated our sight height of 2.08 inches, pre-populated our barrel twist, 7.5 inches. Our shooting angle was 0. Now, this is the angle that you're shooting uphill or downhill, and even a very slight angle of 1 degree should be accounted for if you can. So there are a couple different ways to get this. Most rangefinders will tell you what angle they're reading. Likewise, there's some auxiliary apps on your phone that you could get that with, and there's actually one built into ForDoff. If you go into the HUD screen, you'll see a shooting angle icon. If you select it, it'll bring up, now you can either point that at your target or you can actually lay your cell phone on your barrel and capture that reading. And that will tell you the angle that which you're pointing at. Now, for the weather portion, there's some things here. Now, it's important to get the most accurate data that you can. So we used a Kestrel. If you have some other weather meter, that's really advantageous. You're going to need your elevation, the pressure, the temperature, and the humidity. Now, let's say you don't have those tools available to you. Well, you can still get it done. If you adjust your altitude, we will pre-populate your pressure. It's not perfect, but it's pretty close. And next, if you can guess your temperature really close, whether that be an app on your phone or maybe the thermometer that's in your vehicle, something to get you really close, that will be better than nothing, but not quite as good as getting it from a very accurate source like a Kestrel. So you put that in there. Next is your wind speed and direction. And when you zero your rifle, if there's wind present, you need to know about it and you need to tell ForDoff about it so that it creates the correct zero angle for those conditions so it can give you the best solution for your extended range shots. For us this morning, a mild 2-mile-an-hour wind from 176 degrees. And down below, the last two options here are impact height and impact windage. And this is pretty technical, but let's go ahead and get started. All right, we've got our 0 target here that we shot this morning. And as you can see, it shot a nice little wad right there. So if your rifle shot a group where all the bullet holes are touching, the easiest way to do it is to measure the outside of the group and get the median of that and use the median for how low and how far right it was in our case, but it could be anywhere. Now, here's the thing, a lot of people like to have their rifle to hit exactly where their point of aim is, and that's intuitive. However, just know if you moved your scope so that the group was more centered on target, you'll need to shoot another group and use that measurement for the subsequent 0 angle setup. In this case, you do not have to move your scope to reflect point of aim, point of impact. The FORDOF will calculate that all for you. So in this case, we were low 205 thousandths and we were right by 140 thousandths. So to input that into the calculator, the impact height, since we were low, will be minus 0.205. And on the impact windage, we were right. So on the FORDOF, right is plus and left is minus. So we are plus 140 thousandths of an inch. That is how you find your 0 angle. Another potential that you could run into is that your rifle didn't wad the shots up like that. Maybe your groups look a little bit more like this. And that's okay. We can still take some good measurements and get a good 0 angle. To do so, you'll have to measure each bullet hole twice. You're going to measure how far it is above the horizontal axis and how far right or left it's situated on the vertical axis. And again, if it's on the right, it is a plus measurement, and if it's on the left, it is a minus measurement. And you'll simply use your exact center of your aiming portion to find the center of the bullet hole in relation to that point. You'll write those numbers down, and then you'll add them together, average them out, and that will be how high and left or right, or how low you are versus where you are aiming. So just a couple different ways to do it. Once you put them in your Find 0 Angle screen, you'll select the Find 0 Angle icon at the bottom of the screen. That will show you what the 0 angle and what the windage offset results are, and then you'll select Use 0 Angle. Now you can see your 0 angle was input there. Select the back arrow and select the Save icon. You're now ready to use the HUD to calculate a trajectory solution. So now that you've got your favorite created, you'll see it displayed here on the favorites page. Simply press that and it will open up the HUD, or the heads-up display. Now this is the spot where you're going to input your data and get your shooting solutions for each of your shots. With a quick look, in the upper right-hand corner, you got a couple icons. Now those are in-app purchases. That is a custom range card and a multi-HUD. They're great features, and we will address those in a separate video. Down from that, you've got an Edit Rifle information box. You can select that and go into Edit your rifle and even adjust your axial form factor, which we're going to do in a minute. Down from there, you can Edit Environment, and that is to manually input the altitude, pressure, temperature, humidity, and the windage offset. You can manually do that. You've also got an icon down here for Edit Units. Now what this will allow you to do is change from what you selected as your universal default when we set up your profile. So for pressure, temperature, altitude, or wind speed, you can toggle between several different options besides the standard US. If you back out of there, the next option you have is Pair Meter. Now if you're using a Kestrel or a weather flow to get your wind or environmental data, that's how you'll pair it via Bluetooth. Down from that, you've got three options that are in a gray box: the shooting angle, the firing azimuth, and the earth-based effects. Now, shooting angle is very simple. We mentioned this when we set up your zero angle earlier, but you can open it up and either rest it on your barrel or simply point it at your target. And to capture it, you'll simply press the capture button. Firing azimuth, very similar. You simply point the tip of the bullet, the direction in which you're shooting, and hit capture to capture your firing azimuth. And your earth-based effects, now this would be like what is traditionally called Coriolis effect. It really only matters if you're making some very extended range shots, but to turn it on, you simply open it up, toggle it on here, and enter your latitude. Now your latitude can be entered manually, or you can let the GPS on the phone figure that out for you. Down from that, now you've got your wind speed. Now this is an interactive wheel where you just scroll it left or right to the corresponding amount of wind speed. Very handy. If you are linked up via Bluetooth to a Kestrel or a weather flow, that will automatically update for you. To the left of that, we have our distance. And there's a couple different ways to use this. You can either scroll up or down to change the distance, or you can simply press the center of it and manually input the distances that you're shooting. And then the big wheel in the center, that is the wind wheel. So that's how you determine or tell the computer what direction the wind's blowing. And you do so by simply pointing the bullet on the icon, the direction in which you're shooting, and then scrolling that wheel around to reflect the direction that the wind is flowing. Again, if you're connected via Bluetooth to the Kestrel, the weather flow, it'll do that for you. And then down at the bottom, that's where your shooting solution will be displayed. So whatever you do to your wind, speed, and angle and range, that will affect what your total come up and your total windage solution should be. Now here you can do a couple things. One of the neat things is if you select it, like here for come ups, if you push the come up, it will bring up an icon that lets you see how many minutes of angle, how many milliradians, and how many inches that solution is. This is convenient if you're working with maybe a spotter or another shooter that's talking in a different ballistic language than you. And you can also swap between yards and meters here. You can do the same for windage. And the last icon on the HUD, on the bottom right, is a range card. If you select that, you can select how long you want your table to go and what the interval should be, and it will display on your screen for you. So what the next step for us is to establish what the axial form factor is. So let's get started. To shoot your axial form factor, you're going to want to do a couple things. And one of the first is to get a target with a really good aiming reference. We like to use a target like this here at the shop with a water line vertically and horizontally to give us a really precise place to hold the reticle in the scope to make sure we're making it as accurate as possible. Next, you're going to want to make sure you have a very good range and shot angle when you do this as well. As always, with any ballistic calculator, the data that you get out is equal to the data that you put in. So you want to make sure you've got a really good aiming point at a distance that you can feel really comfortable shooting a nice tight group. You want it to be further than 300 or 400 yards, but not so far away that you can't reliably aim at the same point. So usually, 400, 500, 600 yards is a good reference, sometimes 700 or 800 in the right shooting condition. So you'll get this target out there, get a good range, a good shooting angle, and you'll run a trajectory profile that will tell you what to dial on your scope. You'll dial that correction, you'll make a good wind call, and you're going to shoot at least 5 shots as good and clean as you can at that range. And for us, this target was 500 yards away at a slight uphill angle of 5 degrees with our 2-mile-an-hour wind. It gave us a shooting solution of 2.35 mils, so that's 2.4 mils to put on the gun, and we shot this 5-shot group. Now, here's what we'll need to do to determine the axial form factor. First, we'll need to take a look at the target. Now, we'll measure each individual shot in relation to this watermark going horizontal across the target. Now, we'll measure high and low, add those together. These are plus numbers, those are minus numbers, and get the average. Now for our 5-shot group, the median of the group averaged 0.284 inches high. Now, our wind call was good, left and right, there's no correction needed. However, if you made a bad wind call and your group was shifted a tenth or two over, what you would need to do before proceeding is go on the FORDOFF and adjust the wind angle or speed, whichever you were incorrect with, until your windage reflects what you saw on paper. Now, once you've done that, we're going to adjust the axial form factor by selecting the Edit Rifle Info in the upper right hand of the screen. Now here at the bottom, you'll see Axial Form Factor, and it's going to pre-select 1.0. And the way we achieved the 1.0 is an average. So at Hornady, we developed these FORDOFF files by shooting through multiple rifles, multiple twist rates, multiple propellants, different barrel manufacturers, different muzzle devices. All of those things that I mentioned has an impact on the overall drag of the bullet. So we get all of those and we make a good average drag profile, and that's the 1. Now, if one of those variables is different in your rifle than our rifle, then you're going to have a slight variation in drag, and that does need to be accounted for. The good news is that once you account for it one time and save it, then that is a blanket saving and it will work. It'll be very accurate at every range you shoot. So we'll simply select the Axial Form Factor tab. And here you can see 1.0, and it told us to dial 2.35 mils, which should have been 42.27 inches of correction. Now, we were high, 0.284. So what we really need is a measurement closer to 42.0 to get that 0.284 back out of there. So if you look here, we've got a 0.98, which should have been a correction of 2.3 mils or 42.03 inches of correction. And that lines up very well. Another way that you could do this if you don't have paper is you can shoot a steel target, or you can be out at the range and just engaging steel at different ranges. And if you notice that you're consistently high or low, you can adjust the axial form factor by tenths of a mil. So if you're out shooting and at 500, you're almost a tenth high or 2/10 high, and at 600 it's the same thing, you can go in and just use the mils tab and see that I was dialing 2.2, but I really needed 2.3. So select the one that gives you the 2.3 average. In this case, we were a 0.98, so it's got 2% less drag than what the average did. Once you select that, you'll select the back arrow and save, and now that axial form factor is saved to this profile. So now that you've downloaded the app, created your favorite profile, and got your zero angle and your axial form factor, if done correctly, the FORDOFF engine will provide you the most accurate shooting solutions that are available. You can now update your atmospheric data and take your rifle system anywhere in the world and get the most exact shooting solutions.